up. He wanted me to walk across the gym. He said, do this. This is called the soldier's walk. He made me do this across a gym full of people. This is a soldier's walk? This is not, you're making this up. What is there, a gay Nazi brigade out there we don't know about? This is the Springtime for Hitler number from the producers. This is not a military thing. Then he says to me, give me a sit-up. I said, oh, nay. I don't do ups. I told him that when I signed up. I don't do ups. I do downs. Sit down, lay down. Blackjack, I'll double down. Give me a cheeseburger, I'll wolf it down. Put on a little music, I'll boogie down. But I don't do ups. Ups defy gravity. Gravity is a law. I obey the law. So, I see people at the gym, and I just don't think healthy. I do this machine. Do you know this horrible machine? I don't know the name of it. I call it the horrible machine. I started in February. I could do 5 minutes, but I would have to cry for 2.5 of those minutes. People don't want to see that at the gym. They complain. Take him off that machine. He's crying. Now I can do 45 minutes, and it's a real miracle. But, yeah, and I'm a pleasure to be around, too. I see other people working out on the machines. They're thinking, what machine am I going to do next? Maybe I'll do weights. And I'm thinking if I do 45 minutes and live, I'm going to have raviolis and a nap. So the last 15 minutes is a chant. Raviolis and a nap. Raviolis and a nap. I'm like this on the machine. The trainer comes by and says, I see you sweating. That's great. You know, you're burning fat. Oh, good. I hope it's a control burn. Because if this baby goes up all at once, there's going to be a mushroom cloud over this gym. I've gone to nutritionists. It's tough to eat well on the road. There's a lot of late night eating. And I went to one nutritionist. I walk into his office. He says, well, the good news is you can have all the salad you want. Whew. That is good news. I was nervous. I came in here thinking, please, God, anything. Don't take away my salad. How will I live without mixed greens? You mean I can have all the radicchio I want? Stop, I'm getting a chubby. He wanted me to eat salad as the food. Salad's not food. Salad comes with the food. You go out, you order a steak, what do? They bring you a salad. They don't even charge you for it because it ain't worth anything, because it ain't food. Salad is a promissory note that food will soon arrive.
Good morning. It's Monday, Medal of Honor Monday, June the 12th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the Star-Spangled Banner, we will have neutral versus disloyal, social isolation, no free lunch, the rape of the mind, tips versus bribes, and the Medal of Honor. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing and remove your hats for the national anthem of the United States of America.
Can you see by
Thank you. And now there's no free lunch, 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
Under capitalism, the common man enjoys amenities which in ages gone by were unknown and therefore inaccessible, even to the richest people. But of course, these motor cars, television sets, and refrigerators do not make a man happy. In the instant in which he acquires them, he may feel happier than he did before. But as soon as some of his wishes are satisfied, new wishes spring up. Such is human nature. Ludwig von Mises. The reality of human nature to which von Mises speaks here is a primary reason to avoid materialistic foundations to defend free enterprise. The consumption of a good brings us temporal happiness. The production of a good can bring us dignifying satisfaction as image bearers of the ultimate creator. The aim of free enterprise and the aim of her defenders must never be the mere temporal happiness that comes from a satisfying bite of food or intrigue that comes from use of a new technology. Rather, it is the human flourishing that freedom and our productive capacity are most qualified to bring. And human flourishing is exponentially deeper and wider than a mere sugar high from a consumer product.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He knows that the government has no rights. He is religious. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American. Back in a minute. Thank you. What are the true conservatives' suggested federal political priorities? Number 1, recognize that the government has no rights. 2, defund Planned Parenthood. 3, replace the Affordable Care Act. 4, institute zero-based budgeting. 5, prohibit collective bargaining for all public employees. 6, assign criminal and civil liabilities to all government regulators. 7, immediately repeal the Patriot Act. 8, immediately repeal all emergency dictator laws. 9, reinstate writs of outlawry. 10, use taxpayer funds to sponsor recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. 11, create a flexible minimum wage. 12, means test health care. 13, immediately and permanently prohibit investment banking by any office holder. And 14, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Back in a minute. Thank you. What are the true conservative cultural priorities? Bring back hierarchy. Bring back the admiration of intelligence, morality, and beauty. Bring back single-income households. Integration, parenting, the primacy of existence, certainty of knowledge, and universal rights and wrongs. Bring back principled behavior, masculinity and femininity. Bring back Adam 12, John F. Kennedy, the gold standard, pre-HMO medical care, and nonprofit news. Bring back civil service, the term stupid question, arguments and fights, the cultural influence of the church and the Boy Scouts. Bring back the influence of social organizations such as the Lions Club and the Rotary Club. Bring back bowling. Back in a minute. Thank you. So I'm watching Stuart Varney, and he actually came back from vacation. I mean, here, Stuart Varney, as an aside here, he runs his mouth 2 or 3 hours a day, and I guess he's just fucking exhausted. So he's got to take a week or two off. But anyways, so he's got, all this big deal about the Trump indictment. And he has a clip of Bill Barr, Trump's former attorney general, who's basically anti-Trump. And we figured that out a long time ago. He hates Trump. He's a Trump hater, and so he's going to spew his hatred about Trump and claim that these charges are legitimate, et cetera, et cetera. I don't even listen to it. And then I was thinking, if I don't listen to it, doesn't that mean that I'm not open-minded? Because that was the predecessor to neutral, was open-minded. You have to be open-minded. And I thought, so what? So what? So I'm not open-minded. Because the what open-minded, the pressure to be open-minded or neutral is really what they're doing is encouraging you to be disloyal to your ideas, disloyal to people, and eventually disloyal to the United States of America itself. So I'm going to remain loyal to my ideas. I'm going to remain loyal to my principles and say no to the fallacy, because that's what it is. Any idea that sounds good at first blush but is wrong when you analyze it is called a fallacy. And I call it the fallacy of the open mind, in which they're really inviting you to be disloyal to your ideas, disloyal, of course, to Donald Trump, and disloyal to the United States of America. Don't be fooled. Back in a minute. Thank you. So I was listening to somebody on the radio, some Republican on the radio, and he was talking about, and this is a guy that's always on about transgender, and should say transsexual. So that's his number one mistake. But he's always on every episode, every show is about transsexual. Transsexual this, transsexual that, the kids this, kids that. Never, it's always the same. So he's talking about this. And he says that there was a lady or parents who wanted to change their daughter, I guess, over to male or whatever. And so they had to go sue and go to a judge, and the judge agreed with them. And so what? What this is about is peer pressure. If you live next door to people that are going to do those kinds of things to your kids, you have to inform them, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to know you. Don't say hi. Don't think. You just go, well, you do your own thing. I'm not going to have anything to do with you. That's what's going to make the difference. Too many times Republicans go left by thinking that everything is about politics and about laws. We got to pass another law. We got to pass another law. We got to pass another law. Then we're just becoming Democrats. That's what the Democrats do. Everything for the Democrats is about government. Government. And the Republicans are going the same direction. Oh, we got to pass a law. We got to pass a law. No, we don't. What we simply have to do is exert peer pressure. Isolate these folks. Okay? Don't have anything to do with them. Hopefully none of these folks are your relatives, but that's the way to handle it. Individually, we go to the government to help solve our problems only as a last resort. The first thing we do is we try to handle it by ourselves, so to speak. Okay, in this particular case, it's going to be peer pressure. If parents know that they're going to be socially isolated, nobody's going to want to talk to them, and nobody's going to invite them over for 4th of July barbecues or whatever, then that's when they're going to stop doing this. So, back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the rape of the mind.
The trader who consciously takes option for the other side. In my study of political traitors and collaborators, I found that most of them shared two common characteristics. They were easily influenced by minds stronger than their own, and none of them would admit his disloyalty as an act of treason. The traitors I interviewed always volunteered innumerable justifications of their behavior, always surrounded their treachery with a complicated web of sophisms and rationalizations. Actually, they could not tolerate an objective picture of their actions. If they did, they would condemn themselves out of their own mouths. Unconsciously, most of them realized the nature of their crimes and were tormented by guilt feelings. These guilt feelings would have been unbearable if they'd admitted, even to themselves, the enormity of their deeds. During the Nazi occupation of the Low Countries, I saw these qualities demonstrated again and again. Many of our native traitors were spineless people, ready to accept almost any new idea or elaborate theory. Their suggestibility was their greatest liability. Most of these would-be Nazis had never possessed strong personalities of their own. They had failed in their ambitions and had been disappointed in life, and they readily transferred their frustrated personal longings to a political will-o'-the-wisps. After the German invasion and occupation, these people confronted their defeated countrymen with triumphant I-told-you-sos. They boasted proudly of their wisdom in having bet on the right horse. They gained a tremendous feeling of self-importance, and their newly acquired, blown-up self-assurance, backed by the enemy's armed force, made them hard and contemptuous of their compatriots. In an effort to justify their own behavior and their greed for power, they tried to convert others to their new way of life. They were possessed by a compulsion to become propagandists for the invader. Turncoats always try to soothe their own bad consciences by persuading others to share their crime. Of course, they had some real grievances. Everybody does. But these traitors were influenced less by them than by fancied injustices. Through acts of treason, they avenged themselves on society for the private wrongs they had suffered because of their personal failures. Their resentments could be felt in everything they said. The Nazi strategists were experts in exploiting this sense of dissatisfaction. They seemed to know intuitively whether or not an individual could be ensnared by Nazi propaganda. One case I knew of in Holland concerned an ex-director of a large concern who had been ousted from his position on ethical grounds. Early in the occupation, this man received an invitation to join the Nazi ranks, and in surprisingly short time, he became the leader of an important Nazi business. The Nazis gave him the feeling of having been vindicated. Among the recruits for the Nazi police force in the occupied territories were turncoats of all sorts, and even the inmates of asylums for the criminally insane. The pathological grudge these people had against society was the foil by which the Nazis turned them into traitors. The Germans themselves despised these men, but they were cunning enough to put them to the best possible use. The Nazis also played a strange game with some authors and artists who had not received enough appreciation. The enemy flattered these men by buying and praising their work. The artists were first told they could write and create as they pleased, without fear of interference. Gradually, little political services were asked of them. Tiny little concessions like favorable report of a meeting or a favorable reference to a philosophy with which they did not agree. It is the impact of that first little concession that starts the inner avalanche of self-justification that finally leads to self-betrayal. Following the first compromise and self-justification comes the second, and this one is met with shrewder self-exculpations. After all, the compromiser has had experience in rationalization by now. The repeated concessions turn into submission and voluntary cooperation. As I said before, once a man is seduced into a small ideological concession, it is very difficult for him to stop. From now on, his imagination produces enough justifications which help him maintain his self-respect. The inwardly insecure traitor always feels the urge to identify with the enemy, the hostile invader. He's never belonged, never had a feeling of identification with his own group, has never felt the rewards of such cohesion, nor has he won the love, sympathy, and respect of his fellows. Therefore, he wants to join the others. He may even go so far as to call his former friends traitors. Lord Haw Haw, William Joyce, the British traitor who was executed by his government, considered himself a real Aryan German, and in this way justified his fight against England. In the hectic days immediately following the Nazi invasion of Holland, I found myself an occasional inner temptation to go over to the enemy, to the stronger party with its powerful organizations, all ready to support one, to back one up. I even had a dream about visiting Hitler and convincing him in a childish and friendly way of the righteousness of our cause. I did not succumb to this dream temptation, but there were a few who fell for such infantile pictures and were unable to withstand their need to submit. The need to conform, to be accepted, to be safe and respectable is deeply embedded in man. In our analysis of the inner forces that lead men to surrender their mental integrity under the pressure of prison and concentration camp life, we saw how important a role this mechanism plays. Living in a country occupied by the enemy is by no means as horrifying as living in a POW or concentration camp, but it is, nevertheless, frightening. And in this frightening situation, the need to conform may show itself in surrender to the enemy ideology. Those who resisted this need, even though they felt it, usually became more fervently anti-Nazi as a consequence of their guilt feelings about this impulse to treachery. This war experience taught us another truth. Traitors can be made by overwhelming collective suggestions. In the ambiguous chaos of shouting ideologies and changing values, the mind becomes sullen and stubborn. And where there is immaturity and lack of inner control, it may become confused in its loyalties and simply surrender to the most powerful group. The Nazis, with their perverted political methods, tried to supply the weak, the ambitious, the disgruntled, and the frustrated with a ready-made set of bogus ideals to justify surrender to their side. In Mein Kampf, Hitler says that when the disappointed are given a sense of importance, they may swallow every suggestion with the utmost docility. He knew that human weakness, even kindness, can be used as a starting point for a systematically nurtured conversion. Hitler knew, too, that unlimited political terror could make a traitor of almost anyone, spread fear, terror, and hunger, inflict penetrating pain, and finally, as a result of mental coercion and growing confusion, many will succumb and even betray their own families. In many of the concentration camps, the victims themselves were in charge of the gas chamber killings and kept their gruesome jobs until their own turns came. Fear and terror had made will-less slaves out of them. There is still another human characteristic that can lead to treason and betrayal. There are some people who simply do not know where their loyalties belong. The case of Klaus Fuchs, the man who betrayed atomic secrets to Russia, is a dramatic example of this. Here was a highly intelligent person, an expert on most difficult theoretical problems, lost in a sea of conflicting loyalties. Because of the Nazi persecution of his Quaker family, he adopted a new fatherland, England. In the meantime, he carried a dream of a mystical universal world which he thought to find in the totalitarian ideology. In the midst of his confusion about world problems, he simply did not know where his loyalty should be. This was not the case of schizophrenia or a Jekyll and Hyde situation, as the newspapers reported, but a case of confusion of loyalties in a hyper-intellectual mind. Fuchs did not know emotionally where he belonged. In other cases, people were literally pushed into treason and collaboration because nobody in their environment trusted them. This happened, for instance, in Flanders with the collaborators of the First World War. Several of them were compelled to become collaborators again. This analysis of the factors that lead men to treason certainly does not imply that every man must remain loyal to the group from which he has originally received his morals and ideals. Better insight and higher ethics may override our childhood loyalties. It is the fate and the need of human beings to go beyond their teachers and to correct, if possible, the traditional rules of their schools. The great philosopher Socrates was accused of being a traitor because he corrupted the minds of the youth of Athens. And yet today we know that Socrates was far from being a corrupter.
And that was The Conscious Traitor from The Rape of the Mind by Joost-Meerlo, M.D. Back in a minute. Thank you. So I was listening to Mr. Motec on money, and he had a guest on there talking about tipping and how a lot of customers are getting annoyed. And I want to remind my listeners that the reason people are annoyed is because most of the time you're not being asked for a tip. You're being asked for a bribe. The difference between a tip and a bribe is timing. If you're being asked for the money up front, you're being asked for a bribe. If you're being asked for the money after the fact, after you've been served, that's a tip. So keep that in mind and act accordingly. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, since this is Medal of Honor Monday, we're going to play the President of the United States, Barack Obama, presenting the Medal of Honor to Captain Groberg.
Almighty God, we hear your words in the psalmist, "How can we repay the Lord for his goodness to me?" Today, we remember your goodness and the sacrifice of all our soldiers. Heal our hearts from the tears of their grieving families. Be with us as we honor the actions of our heroes. We give thanks for their sacred calling to serve, to protect, to defend our nation and our way of life without counting the costs. May this heroic and virtuous soldier be an example for future generations. May his life serve as a beacon for our young men and women who run to the sound of the guns for the sake of humanity, for the sake of the nation they have come to love. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. Good morning and welcome to the White House. A little more than 3 years ago, as Captain Florent Groberg was recovering from his wounds as a consequence of the actions that we honor today, he woke up on a hospital bed in a little bit of a haze. He wasn't sure, but he thought he was in Germany. And someone was at his bedside talking to him. And he thought it was the lead singer from the heavy metal band Korn. Flo thought, what's going on? Am I hallucinating? But he wasn't. It was all real. And so today, Flo, I want to assure you, you are not hallucinating. You are actually in the White House. Those cameras are on. I am not the lead singer from Korn. We are here to award you our nation's highest military honor, the distinction, the Medal of Honor. Now, Flo and I have actually met before. 3 years ago, I was on one of my regular visits to Walter Reed to spend some time with our wounded warriors, and Flo was one of them. We talked. Turns out he liked the Chicago Bears. So I liked him right away. And I had a chance to meet his parents, who could not be more gracious and charming, and you get a sense of where Flo gets his character from. It is wonderful to see both of you again. I also want to welcome Flo's girlfriend, Carson, who apparently, Flo tells me, he had to help paint an apartment with just the other day. So there's some honey-do lists going on. His many friends, fellow soldiers and family, all of our distinguished guests. A day after Veterans Day, we honor this American veteran whose story, like so many of our vets and wounded warriors, speaks not only of gallantry on the battlefield, but resilience here at home. As a teenager, just up the road in Bethesda, Flo discovered he had an incredible gift. He could run fast. Half mile, 2 mile, he'd leave his competition in the dust. He was among the best in the state, and he went on to run track and cross country at the University of Maryland. Flo's college coach called him the consummate teammate. As good as he was in individual events, somehow he always found a little extra something when he was running on a relay with a team. Distance running is really all about guts, and as one teammate said, Flo could suffer a little more than everyone else could. So day after day, month after month, he pushed himself to his limit. He knew that every long run, every sprint, every interval could help shave a second or two off his times. And as he'd find out later, a few seconds can make all the difference. Training, guts, teamwork. What made Flo a great runner also made him a great soldier. In the Army, Flo again took his training seriously, hitting the books in the classroom, paying attention to every detail in field exercises because he knew that he had to be prepared for any scenario. He deployed to Afghanistan twice. First as a platoon leader, and then a couple of years later when he was handpicked to head up a security detail. And so it was on an August day 3 years ago that Flo found himself leading a group of American and Afghan soldiers as they escorted their commanders to a meeting with local Afghans. It was a journey that the team had done many times before, a short walk on foot, including passage over a narrow bridge. At first, they passed pedestrians, a few cars and bicycles, even some children. But then they began to approach the bridge, and a pair of motorcycles sped toward them from the other side. The Afghan troops shouted at the bikers to stop, and they did, ditching their bikes in the middle of the bridge and running away. And that's when Flo noticed something to his left. A man dressed in dark clothing, walking backwards just some 10 feet away. The man spun around and turned toward them, and that's when Flo sprinted toward him. He pushed him away from the formation, and as he did, he noticed an object under the man's clothing, a bomb. The motorcycles had been a diversion. And at that moment, Flo did something extraordinary. He grabbed the bomber by his vest and kept pushing him away. And all those years of training on the track, in the classroom, out in the field, all of it came together in those few seconds. He had the instincts and the courage to do what was needed. One of Flo's comrades, Sergeant Andrew Mahoney, had joined in too, and together they shoved the bomber again and again, and they pushed him so hard he fell to the ground onto his chest, and then the bomb detonated. Ball bearings, debris, dust exploded everywhere. Flo was thrown some 15 or 20 feet and was knocked unconscious, and moments later he woke up in the middle of the road in shock. His eardrum was blown out, his leg was broken and bleeding badly. Still, he realized that if the enemy launched a secondary attack, he'd be a sitting duck. And when a comrade found him in the smoke, Flo had his pistol out, dragging his wounded body from the road. That blast by the bridge claimed 4 American heroes. 4 heroes Flo wants us to remember today. One of his mentors, a 24-year Army vet who always found time for Flo and any other soldier who wanted to talk. Command Sergeant Major Kevin Griffin. A West Pointer who loved hockey and became a role model to cadets and troops because he always cared more about other people than himself, Major Tom Kennedy. A popular Air Force leader known for smiling with his whole face. Someone who always seemed to run into a friend wherever he went, Major David Gray. And finally, a USAID Foreign Service officer who had just volunteered for a second tour in Afghanistan, a man who moved to the United States from Egypt and reveled in everything American, whether it was Disneyland or chain restaurants or roadside pie, Regai Abdel Fattah. These 4 men believed in America. They dedicated their lives to our country. They died serving it. Their families, loving wives and children, parents and siblings, bear that sacrifice most of all. So while Regai's family could not be with us today, I'd ask 3 Gold Star families to please stand and accept our deepest thanks. Today, we honor Flo because his actions prevented an even greater catastrophe. You see, by pushing the bomber away from the formation, the explosion occurred farther from our forces and on the ground instead of in the open air. While Flo didn't know it at the time, that explosion also caused a second, unseen bomb to detonate before it was in place. Had both bombs gone off as planned, who knows how many could have been killed. Those are the lives Flo helped to save. And we are honored that many of them are here today. Brigadier General James Mingus, Sergeant Andrew Mahoney, who was awarded a Silver Star for joining Flo in confronting the attacker. Sergeant First Class Brian Brink, who was awarded a Bronze Star with valor for pulling Flo from the road. Specialist Daniel Valderrama, the medic who helped to save Flo's leg. Private First Class Benjamin Secor and Sergeant Eric Ochart, who also served with distinction on that day. Gentlemen, I'd ask you to please stand and accept the thanks of a grateful nation as well. At Walter Reed, Flo began his next mission, the mission to recover. He suffered significant nerve damage, and almost half of the calf muscle in his left leg had been blown off. So the leg that had powered him around that track, the leg that moved so swiftly to counter the bomber, that leg had been through hell and back. Thanks to 33 surgeries and some of the finest medical treatment a person can ask for, Flo kept that leg. He's not running, but he's doing a lot of CrossFit. I would not challenge him to CrossFit. He's putting some hurt on some rowing machines and some stair climbers. I think it is fair to say he is fit. Today, Flo is medically retired, but like so many of his fellow veterans of our 9/11 generation, Flo continues to serve. As I said yesterday at Arlington, that's what our veterans do. They are incredibly highly skilled, dynamic leaders, always looking to write that next chapter of service to America. For Flo, that means a civilian job with the Department of Defense to help take care of our troops and keep our military strong. And every day that he is serving, he will be wearing a bracelet on his wrist, as he is today, a bracelet that bears the names of his brothers in arms who gave their lives that day. The truth is, Flo says that day was the worst day of his life, and that is the stark reality behind these Medal of Honor ceremonies. That for all the valor we celebrate, all the courage that inspires us, these actions were demanded amidst some of the most dreadful moments of war. That's precisely why we honor heroes like Flo. Because on his very worst day, he managed to summon his very best. That's the nature of courage. Not being unafraid, but confronting fear and danger and performing in a selfless fashion. He showed his guts. He showed his training, how he would put it all on the line for his teammates. That's an American we can all be grateful for. That's why we honor Captain Florent Groberg today. May God bless all who serve and all who have given their lives to our country. We are free because of them. May God bless their families, and may God continue to bless the United States of America with heroes such as these.
President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3, 1863, has awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to Captain Florent A. Groberg, United States Army. Captain Florent A. Groberg distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty while serving as a personal security detachment commander for Task Force Mountain Warrior, 4th Infantry Brigade Combat Team, 4th Infantry Division, during combat operations against an armed enemy in Asadabad, Kunar Province, Afghanistan, on August 8, 2012. On that day, Captain Groberg was leading a dismounted movement consisting of several senior leaders, to include 2 brigade commanders, 2 battalion commanders, 2 command sergeants major, and an Afghanistan National Army Brigade commander. As they approached the provincial governor's compound, Captain Groberg observed an individual walking close to the formation. While the individual made an abrupt turn towards the formation, he noticed an abnormal bulge underneath the individual's clothing. Selflessly placing himself in front of one of the brigade commanders, Captain Groberg rushed forward, using his body to push the suspect away from the formation. Simultaneously, he ordered another member of the security detail to assist with removing the suspect. At this time, Captain Groberg confirmed the bulge was a suicide vest, and with complete disregard for his life, Captain Groberg again, with the assistance of the other member of the security detail, physically pushed the suicide bomber away from the formation. Upon falling, the suicide bomber detonated his explosive vest outside of the perimeter of the formation, killing 4 members of the formation and wounding numerous others. The blast from the first suicide bomb caused the suicide vest of a previously unnoticed second suicide bomber to detonate prematurely with minimal impact on the formation. Captain Groberg's immediate actions to push the first suicide bomber away from the formation significantly minimized the impact of the coordinated suicide bomber's attack on the formation, saving the lives of his comrades and several senior leaders. Captain Groberg's extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty at the risk of his life are in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself, 4th Infantry Brigade Combat Team, 4th Infantry Division, and the United States Army.
And that was the President of the United States, President Barack Obama, presenting the Medal of Honor to Captain Groberg. Back in a minute. Thank you. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. And until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.